Life has a funny way of testing you. One moment, you think you have it all figured out. The next, the ground beneath your feet gives way. My story started with what I thought was a fairy tale. I was married to Clara, a woman I adored more than anything. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and for me that was enough. I worked a modest job at a local library, surrounded by books and dreams. I believed our love was a fortress, strong enough to withstand any storm, but I was wrong. The storm that came wasn't one of nature, but of human nature. Clara started changing. The laughter that once filled our small apartment became rare. It was replaced by sighs of frustration and longing glances at the glossy pages of magazines showcasing lives we couldn't afford. She'd talk about her friends' lavish vacations, their designer handbags, their sprawling homes. "Is this it, Mark?" she'd ask, her voice laced with a bitterness that chilled me to the bone. "Is this all we're ever going to have?" I tried to reassure her, telling her that happiness wasn't about money, that we were building a future together. But my words were like whispers against a hurricane. The day she left is seared into my memory. She stood by the door, suitcase in hand, her face a mask of cold resolution. "I can't do this anymore, Mark," she said, her voice devoid of the warmth I once cherished. "I want more than this. I want a life, not just an existence." She told me she was leaving me for someone else. His name was Richard, a wealthy businessman she'd met at a gallery opening. He could give her everything I couldn't. I begged, I pleaded, I asked her if the years we'd shared meant nothing. She just shook her head. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Mark." And with those words, she walked out of my life, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The months that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. Every corner of our apartment held a memory of her, a ghost of a life that was no longer mine. I lost weight. I barely slept. My job at the library, once a sanctuary, became a chore. But one evening, while reshelving books in the finance section, a title caught my eye. It was a book on stock market investing for beginners. On a whim, I checked it out. That night, instead of wallowing in my misery, I read. I read about markets, about trends, about calculated risks. A tiny spark ignited within me. Clara thought I was nothing without her. I decided to prove her wrong, not for her, but for myself. I started small, investing a tiny portion of my meager savings. I spent my nights studying, learning, absorbing every piece of information I could find. I made mistakes, of course. I lost money. But with every loss came a lesson. Slowly, meticulously, I started to see returns. Small gains at first, but they grew. My small portfolio began to blossom. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my sense of self-worth. I found a new purpose, a new passion. I moved out of the old apartment, a place heavy with ghosts, and into a new one. I started rebuilding my life, piece by piece, on my own terms. Years passed. I was no longer the broke librarian Clara had left behind. My investments had flourished beyond my wildest dreams. I had started my own investment consulting firm, and it was thriving. I had a beautiful home, I traveled, but most importantly, I had found a quiet confidence in myself that had nothing to do with my bank account. I rarely thought of Clara. She was a chapter of my life that I had closed, or so I thought. Then one day, an envelope arrived. It was thick, cream-colored, and my name was written in elegant calligraphy. I opened it, and my heart stopped. It was a wedding invitation. Clara was getting married to Richard. A wave of emotions washed over me. Shock, a pang of old hurt, but also a strange sense of amusement. Why would she invite me? Was it a power play? A way to flaunt her new life in my face? Tucked inside was a handwritten note. "Mark," it read, I know it's been a while. I hope you're doing well. It would mean a lot to me if you came. No hard feelings, right, Clara? No hard feelings. The audacity of it was almost comical. For a moment I considered throwing the invitation away, but then an idea began to form. This wasn't about bitterness or petty revenge. This was about closure. It was about showing her, and more importantly, showing myself how far I had come. I RSVP'd yes. I spent the next few weeks preparing, not with anger, but with a calm sense of purpose. I bought a perfectly tailored suit, a watch that spoke of quiet success, and I made a phone call to arrange a little surprise. The day of the wedding arrived. The venue was a magnificent historic estate, exactly the kind of place Clara had always dreamed of. I walked in, and heads turned. I was no longer the unassuming librarian. I moved with an air of confidence that I had earned. I saw Clara across the room, resplendent in a gown that probably cost more than my old annual salary. Her eyes widened when she saw me, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. She excused herself from her guests and walked towards me, a tight, forced smile on her lips. "Mark, I'm so surprised you came." "You invited me," I replied calmly, my voice even. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my suit, my watch. "You look different," she stammered. "Life's been good to me," I said, with a simple smile. Richard, her groom, joined us, puffing out his chest. "So you're the ex," he said with a condescending smirk. "Clara told me all about you. Library guy, right?" Before I could respond, the wedding planner bustled over, looking flustered. "Mr. Peterson," she said, looking directly at Richard, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. The final payment for the venue, it hasn't cleared. The owner is here and he's quite insistent." Richard's face paled. "What?" "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." He started fumbling with his phone, his bravado evaporating. "No mistake, Richard," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. The wedding planner and Richard both turned to look at me. "The owner is right here?" I gave a slight nod. "You see, a few months ago I heard this beautiful estate was for sale. It seemed like a good investment. So I bought it." A collective gasp went through the nearby guests who had overheard. Clara's jaw dropped. She looked at me, then at Richard, then back at me, her face a canvas of utter shock and disbelief. Richard was speechless, sputtering like a car out of gas. I looked at Clara, my expression not of triumph, but of a quiet finality. "You left me because you thought I couldn't give you a life like this," I said softly, so only she could hear. "You were right. I couldn't give you this life. I had to build it for myself. Enjoy your wedding, Clara. It's on the house." I turned, leaving her standing there, a beautiful bride at a lavish wedding that her poor ex-husband now owned. As I walked away, I didn't feel anger or hate. I felt free. My revenge wasn't in ruining her day. It was in the quiet, undeniable truth that my worth was never tied to her opinion of me. It was something I had to find and build, all on my own. Thank you so much for watching my story. If you've ever felt underestimated, remember that your greatest comeback is living well and finding your own happiness. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.